toxicity that is encountered with psychoactive cannabinoids at high doses. Cannabidiol won't make you high. Within that patent, they have an example. They have a number of studies that they did and put into that patent. This is the most interesting one for me. They gave some rodents some strokes, and they had a look at the infarct size afterwards, and also the outcome of the animal, how it was moving, etc. They improved the stroke size by nearly half. This is the godfather of cannabis medicine. He's an Israeli. He was the chap that first found what THC was, and then when it was binding on the CB1, CB2 receptors, he also found cannabidiol. The Israelis are 30 years ahead of the world with regard to this. They have currently about 20,000 patients, 22 I think I was quoted, within their state-funded cannabis system. They will go to the dispensaries and their cannabis doctors and then get prescribed what they need, and then go into their dispensaries and clinics and be monitored and treated through them. Right, so the precursor to THC, THCA, is not psychoactive, but you need to heat it before it becomes psychoactive, so to 120 degrees. So if you have a patient who has cannabis at home and they're wanting to bake it up or whatever, they need to put it in the oven for about 10 minutes at 120 degrees, and then it will become active to the THC, for the THC, if that's what they want. They tried to find the LD50 for single dose for both monkeys and dogs for THC. They could not kill them. There's no actual known LD50 for THC. So despite being psychoactively active, despite getting the patients high, they will still not die.
That's more
THC,
yeah,
this would have been industrially produced, so they would have heated it to get it. So they would have got a heap of it, heated it up, and then probably produced a resin. Because it's lipophilic, if you put cannabis into an olive oil, generally, a heated olive oil, it will extract out that way. That's where you get your butters from, etc. Right, it's a partial agonist in CB1 and CB2. THC binding to the CB1 pathways acts as a down regulator on those neurons, as we've said. And it also works as a positive allosteric modulator on opioid receptors. Another way that you get pain relief from the THC. Right, the effects. Why would you prescribe this? Well, for these effects. For analgesia, as an antiemetic, potentially as an anti-proliferative, but I think the data is still pending on that. As an antioxidant, yes. An antispasmodic, absolutely, it works for spastic low back pain. Works for all types of spasticity, stiff neck syndrome. As an anxiolytic, yes. And certainly some veterans use high doses of THC for their PTSD. Not for everyone though. Some people will find that when they have THC they might feel more anxious. So it's yes and no as an anti-anxiety medication. An appetite stimulant, absolutely. The classical munchies, as they say, as a euphoric and neuroprotective. Oh, that's the off button again. THC is broken down to 11-hydroxy-THC, which is also slightly psychoactive. It does cross the blood-brain barrier more easily, so if someone ingests THC-containing product, then there might be a biphasic effect of feeling psychoactively altered or high, and then a second one a little bit down the track, within about half an hour to an hour. right? There is some breakdown in the liver, but you don't need to adjust for someone with liver failure. High dose THC is given to cancer patients with end-stage liver failure with mets, and there really is no problems. Right, dosing. So someone comes in and says, I want some, can I try some? What are you going to tell them? Well, key facts are, if you inhale it, vaporize it 4 minutes before you get that peak effect. If you eat it, about an hour. Start with a low dose, 1 milligram for inhaled. And for oral, you push it up by a factor of 2.5. How much is that? Well, 1 gram would be about to that line there on that small joint. 0.1. 1 milligram of THC. It's a bit variable depending on how strong the flower is as well. That's not really an issue though. As we said, oral use, lower to titrate. Start with a low dose, wait for 60 minutes, see where the patient's at, and it's about 4 to 8 hours before the end effects of THC. Some people, as we say, can get anxious when they have THC. I recommend having a benzodiazepine on hand if someone's using a fair amount of it, just in case if they're in an anxious state, they can take that. Adverse effects from THC. And of course, the asterisk there, it's dose dependent. You can have THC and not be high or anxious or anything else. You can still get rid of the muscle spasms. You can have pain relief without having those effects. But yeah, increased time of euphoria, potential to merry sedation, anxiety, paranoia. Really high dose, if you were to give a huge amount, of course that can get up to the level of being disordered, etc. You do see these people in the psych wards having huge doses, huge recreational doses, and you essentially have to give them a lot of benzos. One of the hot topics at the moment, does THC cause schizophrenia? It doesn't cause any more schizophrenia. If someone's going to get schizophrenia, they're going to get it anyway. It's just that it brings it on earlier, and that's what the Dunedin study research has shown, and other studies around the world. It's a contraindication for anyone with a history of schizophrenia, and pre-screening is somewhat helpful. I recommend doing the PQ16, especially for your paperwork.
You said it was a treatment for schizophrenia in this line.
No. CBD is the main treater for CBD. Yeah. Yes, I'm quite happy to have questions coming as we go along.
So what about age restriction?
Perfect, wonderful. Leading on to it. Age restrictions, I would say over 25 we're going to be very safe for the first instance of schizophrenia. 20 seems to be what they're looking at in Canada and the US and around the world. I wouldn't recommend it for anyone under the age of 20 unless absolutely required, because the brain is still developing. For your CBD, I don't think there's any restriction on that, really, because there's no side effects. I've yet to see a patient with a side effect on the CBD. Some of the other cannabinoids, they have other effects that are being investigated, and there is an entourage effect. So there's problems with just taking up the THC and giving it, because it just doesn't work the same. It seems that the whole plant seems to work a bit better. It's antibacterial, as an analgesic, and maybe much better than CBD at reducing anxiety and stress. So I'm Not sure where I'm supposed to be pointing this, down there maybe. Pain reliever, anti-inflammatory, antidepressant, and positive mouse progenitor cells. CBN. I'd love to get my hands on some of this. One of the breakdown products of THC, mildly psychoactive, and maybe the strongest cannabinoid to promote sleep. We're going to skip over some of these slides. When I first saw this diagram, I thought the hippies had been having some fun with the coloured crayons. But this is actually from a journal, and all these articles, all these arrows here relate to different articles on the different cannabinoids, and there's a lot of positive things here: antibacterial, antispasmodic, neuroprotection, anxiolytic, bone stimulant. The cannabis juices. There's a group of physicians who believe wholeheartedly in juicing raw cannabis and having it. They believe, and there's not necessarily that I don't believe them, I just don't believe the evidence is there for it yet. There is a lot of positive effects from that. They say taking 2 to 3 raw buds or 30 big shade leaves and juicing them up, sprinkling them on salads, but keeping below 100 degrees to keep it non-psychoactive. There are some stories and some cases from Dr. Courtney about severe Crohn's and rheumatoid arthritis that the patients say that they've been cured by doing this, but only really case studies. Controversies: should it be recreational or not? I guess that's up for the public to decide. IQ increase versus decrease. There's no evidence to show it decreases your IQ. In fact, I read a study that they've got a patient to take extremely high dose of THC for 2 weeks, and then they measured his IQ, and it actually went up. The driving and exclusion period before driving is a hot topic as well. Canada are moving towards doing impairment testing rather than anything else. The amount of THC in your blood doesn't necessarily mean you're psychoactively high. If you were a nurse or a doctor standing next to someone who was vaporizing as a patient and some of that molecule got inside you and you had some THC on a test, technically you would be breaking the law. I don't think that's fair. I put an asterisk next to the testicular cancer because I think that was a really poor study. That was done in Jamaica on I think it was 40 people. The schizophrenia we've talked about. And one more add-on point there is maybe it's due to the really high THC breeds out there. So the street cannabis has been bred for this THC over generations, and there's very little CBD in there. A lot of the product that you get in the US now and in Canada has a lot more CBD in it, and so you can select for that, select a strand that is has a certain amount of CBD. All the medicinal stuff obviously has to go through the testing and be certified to have what you say is in there, so the THC and the CBD levels. Chronic heavy smokers. So if someone's going to smoke a heap of cannabis, they're going to get lung problems. You're still putting some particulate matter down into the lungs. If you put a filter into a joint, you would decrease the tar by about 2/3. You can mitigate these risks by telling them to harm minimize by using a vaporizer. Of course, if you're going to be stoned every day for 10 years, then you probably have some IQ deficiency, although Cheech and Chong might say otherwise. So the contraindications to your prescribing: unstable or severe cardiovascular disease or hypertension. This is because cannabis will drop your blood pressure. Especially in the acute state, you'll see some recreational users using high-dose resin and what's called a dab, and it will drop their blood pressure. Psychotic illness, obviously, addiction and risk factors, obviously, because everything can be abused. The top uses, the #1 use in Canada and the US is for pain. 50% of prescriptions will be for pain products. chronic pain. But it can be tried for anxiety, depression, insomnia, spasm, dyskinesia, PTSD, nausea, epilepsy, and neuroprotection. I have a couple of Parkinson's patients that use it for their spasticity and spasms. We're pumping up their medications, their regular medications, because they're starting to freeze, but then with that comes the dyskinesia. But if you just take it just a small amount, in fact, one of my patients just puts 2 drops on his tongue and rubs around his mouth and gets an effect within 5 minutes and stops shaking. Alright, if you walk into a dispensary in Canada, you will find essentially all these. All the way from raw cannabis to oil mixtures, usually in olive, juices, tinctures, hashish, keef, resin, what's called shatter, so that's a really sticky resin form. It's extracted using either CO2 or isopropyl alcohol or some other form, and then it's very potent form. A lot of different types of edibles and drinks. I don't know if I necessarily agree with those things. And then even rub-ons. Administration. In Australia, you're not allowed to prescribe it for anything other than vaporization or oral. But there's a number of different uses here. The rectal one is, you will find that for people who want to use super high doses. If you have a super high dose orally, you might feel nauseated with it, but if you give it rectally, that's not the case. Okay, so how do you prescribe it? Well, you screen them for schizophrenia, addiction, cardiovascular, educate them on it, get their consent, and then work out what product you need, whether you need CBD alone or CBD with THC, or really just THC. And then you've got to do all the paperwork, and then start them on the dose as we said. Low dose vape, 1 milligram, vaporize, wait 4 minutes, see how you feel, have another dose if you need to. The patient will titrate to their effect. Some patients don't want to be high, others don't care. Others want to be to that state for their anxiety or otherwise. I think you have to do it on a case-by-case basis. Really, it's about harm minimisation in that sort of situation. There's good evidence to show that cannabis does decrease opiate use by about a half in patients, and is a surrogate for opiates, and you can get them off opiates. So it's a lot better than being on opiates, would you say? Yeah. Cool. And then monitor and review. Australia and Queensland, they make us report back every 3 months. Okay, we've got some raw flour up the top here, and then we have some pills here with raw cannabis in it, and then some processed with oil capsules, and then some high-dose resin capsules. Keef, which is crystals from the flower, chilled and then taken off the plant. Hashish, and then some shatter, you can see it's very sticky. It's dispensed in Canada in these wax paper folds, I guess you call them, for about $80, and that's a very high dose, very high potency rather, and then quite highly potent resin there as well for vaporization. The CO2 extractor is to be the flavour of the month. Supercritical CO2 extraction. It's about $120,000 machine there, and out comes your cannabinoid resin. It's probably a fairly expensive amount there as well. Your cigarettes or joints, all the ones that are dispensed have filters these days overseas. Of course, we can't really recommend that. The patients will also be using some pipes, and your grandma might be using a bong. You're going to have a little bit of fun. This is cannabis, right? I don't know if any of you have ever seen any of these water bongs, and obviously a disposable type of version. Dabbing. Everyone seen the dab? Yeah, it originates from recreational users using a high dose resin put through a bong and immediately dropping their blood pressure a bit, so they will drop their blood pressure, faint, and remain faint for 30 seconds, and then come up, stand up and go, what just happened? So that's the history of the dab. Yeah, any questions on the dab?
Is there any correlation between smoking weed and nicotine fractures?
Yeah, so you're going to do a dab, sit down. There is a correlation between marijuana and reggae album sales. This is a volcano device. This is helpful for people with really poor lung function, not very portable. It's heated up to 180 degrees to get the cannabinoids out, but some people push it up about 210. It's about $300 or more. The more portable devices, they are starting to flood into the market. This one here is a $300 Da Vinci device, as they call it. It can do both resin and or cannabis. And this is a more cheaper version. It's about $50 or so. And it comes with different attachments. That one's for putting oil on the top, and that one is for putting raw cannabis. And the breath-activated vaporizers. This device here is activated if you breathe in. Green light comes on the end. You get 1 milligram dose of THC. You can get that in different ratios of THC to CBD. This one, the white one here, is a pure CBD vaporizer. Another type of vaporizer, but this is a permanent battery that you would keep and recharge, and on the end you put your product. Just change it when you run out, obviously. This is one of the dispensaries here with a number of different types of vaporizer. The real cost in the vaporizer is the battery, so you start to get these bigger batteries for the more expensive devices. Dermatologicals, rub-ons. We've got different types of vape pen here, different types of rub-ons. This is a Vancouver dispensary, looking a little bit like a cross between a pharmacy and a coffee shop. In fact, they did have a coffee machine in there as well.